Good evening, merry drinkers. Welcome back. Tonight, we're coming back from the continent to merry old Blighty, and we're going to be looking at an English classic, an ESB, which stands for Extra Special Bitters. Sometimes referred to as extra strong bitters. I suppose they both apply, but extra special is the traditional name where it comes from. A bitter is like the language of the pub. It developed out of people ordering it. It wasn't a specific style that the brewery sort of churned out. It's a pale ale that has just developed over time. And in the pub, you really just you asked for a bitter because of the flavour, that lasting flavour it would give on the back of your tongue, and it would differentiate it from a mild and a porter, two much traditionally darker beers. And over time, that bitter has sort of developed into three streams: classic bitter, the best, and then also the ESB. And as you've chivied up through those, they've generally got stronger and stronger. You don't see too many light bitters these days. They would be down around about 3%. So the weakest you'll probably get is a best, which is in and around 4. And ESB has got an extra bit of oomph into it and will be up around about 5%. The beer we're going to use as an example is probably the OG, the classic example of the brand, which is a Fullers ESB. When they rocked this out in the 70s, it's travelled out internationally, and it's really established itself in the market. You don't see too many of the beers call itself ESB, probably because the Fullers legal team will be in touch if you do. But it's an absolutely outstanding version of the style, and I don't think you can get too much better, to be honest. Using Fullers as an example, they have their Chiswick bitter, which is the light one, London Pride, which I suppose would be their best bitter, and then ESB, they've just called ESB, no messing around. If Don's beer reviews is watching, he'll be getting slightly confused between what's a light and what's a heavy. Let's just go with a heavy for this one, Don. So with ESB, you just start with a normal sort of pale malt brew process. And the main issue when you initially started to brew stronger beers is that the pale ale releases so much sugar, you get a really, really sweet wort. So sweet that it was just too much for olden day palates. You might be able to get away with it these days with the way that pastry sours and stouts have come on board. But yeah, it was almost sickly sweet. And so they had to develop a process to keep that stronger beer. You'd have to bring real balance in with the hops and get a very nice dry bitter finish. Sweet at the front, dry and bitter at the back, and that balance would be to keep it to it. The main drawback for a lot of bitters, if you drink them in the UK, they're going to be cask conditioned anyway, so they're going to be cellar temperature in around sort of 10, 11 degrees. And so if they are slightly one end or the other, they can be quite unpleasant to drink, either too sweet. I tend to find the worst ones that have been overly bittered at the end, and they really just get like a tea tannin at the back of your mouth, which it can be quite difficult to wash out. So to get that dry finish, you late hop that pale ale, and you tend to dry hop it. And the key bit about dry hopping and doing it late is you're not looking to sort of like get all of that bitterness quality draining out of the hops if they're left in there for a long, long time. You're looking to get the oils to really soak in that light, balanced, bitter flavour towards the back end. They also leave it to mature, so similar to the lambic style, but nowhere near as long. We're talking probably a couple of weeks, in around sort of maybe 20 days. They'll just leave the bitter with a layer of English style hops, maybe like a Golding, just to bring out some slight fruit flavours and to provide that sort of slight bitter finish. Complex to make, and the best bit about an ESB is that it does, when you get it right, you get the best of both worlds. You're getting sort of a nice sweet start, a wonderful bitter finish, and then a real serious beer, one that you can appreciate and sup on. So this Fullers ESB, I think it's been this sort of way since the 70s. The brewing division got bought out by Asahi recently, a few years ago, the Japanese sort of lager giant, and they've kind of left them to do their own thing. I'm not as convinced, I think I've said before, I'm not as convinced that London Pride is as good a beer as it was. That feels like it's been tinkered around the edges, but I drink ESB quite regularly, and for me it's an absolute flagship of all the beers that they produce. They still brew on the banks of the Thames in Chiswick in West London. You can still go around and visit the Griffin Brewery. That has been there for a long time, way before Fullers, Smith and Turner were actually formed in the 1850s. I think they've been brewing at the Griffin since the early 1800s. So Fuller's been the original brewing arm, and Smith and Turner bringing in a much more three-dimensional type of business that they set up. But yeah, the brewing arm, now owned by Asahi. Let's get this in a glass and see what it likes. This was bought at the local Waitrose. There are 3 for £5.50. So for about £1.75, you get a 5.9%, 500ml bottle, and it's a beauty. It's got a lovely Griffin bottle cap. I know they export this to the States. Craft beer that we get from the States can be sort of £7-8 here. This is completely in reverse. There is no way they're getting this for about $2 over the pond. They've changed the bottle design slightly. It's still got Legendary Ale down at the bottom. But I recall not too long ago, there used to be a series of medals. This has won World Beer of the Year twice, which by anyone's standards is pretty amazing. It's won European medals, obviously won UK medals, and that used to be proudly displayed down on the bottom. They've just gone for Legendary these days as an ESB. On the back, proudly pioneered by Fullers, this is an ESB that started it all. It should have a deep mahogany colour, delicate bitterness and an orangey fruitcake flavour. It's no wonder that ESB is Fullers' most awarded beer and something of a legendary ale. Crafted from Northdown, Challenger, Target and Goldings hops, as well as rich malts, this unique all-British beer is brewed with pride in the heart of London. Truly an extra special bitter. It's best before 1st of January 26, so I imagine this stays for about 2 years in the bottle. If you have it on cask, it's going to be about 5.5%, but this is probably going to be bottle conditioned. There'll be a bit more sugars left in here that the yeasts have had a nibble on. So you see what it looks like. Got a traditional UK tulip gas from Mr. B, from Joseph Holt. Now I can smell orange already. Hopefully this will all fit in. So there we go. Full pint. Looks lovely. To me, I'd say that's not necessarily a deep mahogany, a light mahogany, a bit down the tan type of colour when I've been on my travels, but it does look lovely. And you're getting orange off the top. There's a beery type, an English pub beery type smell with a hint of orange. So that's sort of like, stained beer, malt that's been sort of left out to dry in the sun. If you've never been into an English pub before, you have to take my word on it. It's an odd but very homely smell all at the same time. So it's mentioned 4 hops on the back. So even though it is quite dark, it's 90% pale malt. Uses optic malt, which is in itself a very biscuity sweet malt. It's also got flaked maize, which tends to sort of, it brings an extra, even more sweetness, but then helps bring out the flavours of the hops. And sort of the tint to it is just 3% crystal malt. That gives it some caramel and this slight red hue. go through each of the hops just before we get in for a tasting. So what we've got, the first one is on here. It's got North Down hops. They've got like a slightly spicy floral type aroma. Challenger is a very sort of like classic English ingredient. That's again slightly peppery, a bit more woody, has a bit more sort of like a tea type finish. Target hops used in quite a lot of things as well. That should bring the orangeness. That usually sort of develops a little bit of citrus, and then the Goldings should bring a rich, earthy, honey type quality. Let's down the hatch and see what this tastes like. Cheers, everyone. It's wonderfully sweet. All those sweet sensors on the right front of your tongue are absolutely mad as soon as it goes into your mouth. They are absolutely lit up. It's a very light to medium bodies. It's quite syrupy, but for a 5.9% beer, it goes down all too easily. There's a slight fizz from the bottle conditioning, which you wouldn't get in the cask, which just dances over your tongue slightly. And there is an orange, a bitter marmalade-y orange. Ever so subtle, it's quite woody. I did a slight burp there and that orange really comes back. So I don't know if that's the way you're supposed to drink it, but that definitely sort of works. That is absolutely beautifully made. An excellent example of an ESB. It should be dark, it should be sweet, it should have slight caramel toffee notes. And for me, an ESB should have sort of a lasting sweetish finish. There should be a bit of bitterness that's got like a marmalade-y dry orange that's just taken the edge off, but the sweetness should deliver. It's not in there as a proper bitter. I don't want sort of like a real tea tanniny taste as I'm swallowing it down. An extra special bitters is just delivering the malt in spades. Delicious. I think you can get that internationally, about £1.75. If you've never tried it before and you see it in the supermarket, there's no craft beer knocking around in England that's going to compete with that for price. It is absolutely exceptional. Tends to be one or two different varieties of the style, but for me, I don't think you can beat it. It's probably why it's included in a book I got for Christmas. This is 300 beers to try before you die. Not whilst you are still alive, but before you die, whilst those precious sands of time are slipping through the hourglass. Come to think of it, the Merry Drinker does look a little bit like Bill Bailey. He came out with that joke. So cheers to Bill, and cheers to the ESB, and putting England on the map.